First of all, I want to thank you people for toying with the idea that you're going to have a sleep out, you're going to come and sleep overnight for the homeless people. Whether you're doing it at Assumption Cottage, Kilmore, you're doing down at Terrelton, you're doing it down at Leongatha, you're doing it in Perth, you're doing it in Adelaide, you're doing it in Brisbane, and you're doing it in Sydney. It's great if you're giving up one night to sleep out. Just to feel the cold, just to feel that you're lying on a cardboard, just to feel that you're uncomfortable. Now I want to refer to my friend Jim. Here's my friend Jim. Look at that man, look at the face, look at the eyes. Jim was a guy that I met 25 years ago, and I was a boarding master at Assumption College in Victoria. And on Wednesday night was my night off from the boarding house. And I would go to Melbourne straight after school, and this was a character that I used to go and see in a tram stop in Melbourne. Now the tram stops in those days weren't the ones they have now. They were nicely built. There was one in Melbourne. You ever go to Melbourne? There was one in Melbourne near the Parliament House, near the St Pat's Cathedral. There is one there. And that's a wonderful place because Jim made that his shelter. Now notice I'm not using the word, a few years ago I used to say he made it his home. But a home is different from a shelter. In fact, a home is different from a house. And I'm going to ask my audience, as I ask you who will see this video, what's the difference between a home and a house? What makes that different? So I'm just asking my audience. Thanks.
Would it be something that having a house, a home, you feel protected in? You feel safe?
Right, having a home you feel protected, that's one aspect. What makes it a home? Family! Family are the key. See, Jim, did Jim have a family? Of course he did. Where was that family? I don't know. Unless Jim was prepared to tell me. But Jim was in that tram stop. He was an alcoholic. So a lot of the homeless people have an addiction. And if you've got an addiction, sometimes you feel ashamed. And Jim felt ashamed. Now a lot of times in homelessness, you can have addiction. His addiction was alcohol. And when I go back 25 years ago, that was a common thing. You'd see these old alcoholic men with a paper bag around a bottle of wine. A paper bag. We're ashamed. Nobody wants us. Nobody wants us. And for a while I was critical of families. This wonderful old man. He and I barracked for the same football team. And so Jim and I had a chat. Each Wednesday night I looked for Jim. If he wasn't there at 9 o'clock, and other nights Vinnies did the same, we'd go looking for him. Now eventually Jim passed away. And so we knew that. And we were sure that Jim, he was homeless. He must have had a family. We knew that. And what we did was we put an ad in the paper. Now a lot of times when you see homeless people, they don't actually live in Melbourne. I had a young person with me one night from Leongatha. She was at the Leongatha Catholic School in Year 11, and she came to Melbourne, and we were out on the van, and I talked to her as I'm talking to you now, and she said, "See the guy over there? My father, he's a friend of my father's." And I said, don't say anything to him unless he recognises you. And the reason behind that was so that you didn't want to embarrass the person. Imagine this fellow. If somebody sort of said, I know you. You're so-and-so. No, because when you come to the big city, people don't know you. In the city, these guys drift in. So getting back to Jim, we put an ad in the paper. And I found out his surname because he had a little bag with him. So what we did was we made certain that Jim was going to have a great funeral. So we had a little service for him. And we gathered people together, and there were people who used to serve Jim on the van, they were there, and a number of the street people were there. And we had a talk. And at the end of it I said, by the way, anybody like to say a few words about Jim? And this lady got up her hand and said, yeah, I would. I want you, Bob, to know that Jim was my boyfriend. 6 other women arose and said like hell he was. We were his girlfriends. Can you imagine 7 women aged between 30 and 40 telling what a great guy this guy was. He did well, he had 7 girlfriends, he did well. And there was great stories going on. Now at the end of when I was coming out, there was this wonderful young woman dressed beautifully, and as I'm coming out of the little church, she said, excuse me sir, she said, you seem to know Jim well. I said, I did. I knew him very well. And she said, I want to thank you for the wonderful little ceremony you had for my father. I said, where did you find out? She said, I read it in the Courier Mail in Brisbane. And she said, I knew it had to be Dad. In his bag of possessions, he had a photo of an 18-year-old girl. This young woman was now 29. She had graduated from medicine. He never forgot her. That photo, never forgot her. What about today? See, the last few years, since I've finished my work in education welfare down in Melbourne, I've been coordinating the soup banks. What's the situation today? We probably read about it in the papers where you can see photos along Flinders Street of people sleeping rough. We call that sleeping rough. People lying down, sleeping in those sort of places. Why? Why today? Well, there could be several reasons. And the reasons are not the reasons that Jim, 20 years ago, that alcoholic reason. We don't see Jim. I don't see people like that on the street. What I see on the street today, and what you will see, is people who look pretty much like me. Reasonably well dressed, because it's a real pride. If I go out, I dress up. Where do they get all their stuff from? There are so many people today who want to give generously to people on the street. There's people out there, and there'll be people out there tonight who will have lovely jackets for them. And some of the guys will say, I don't really need that. We don't see that many women on the street, because thank God the women have got refuges they can go to. But we do see a few. What about the people who come to the van? I just want to share 2 or 3 stories with you before we finish this part. And the first one is about a vanny called John. Now John was at university and he was doing engineering, and he was on his 4th year of engineering, pretty bright cookie, and he used to give up one night a week from 6 o'clock, 6:30 to 11 o'clock at night to come out and work on the van. And after a while, when I'd go out, I noticed that Johnny wasn't serving, but he was having a conversation with this fellow. And I said to Johnny, what do you talk about? Thinking he would say football or something like that. And he said, we talk about engineering. Interesting, engineering. And then he said, Doug, why is a person who graduated engineering at Melbourne Uni is living on the street? I said, I don't know, Johnny. He said, he's well dressed. He's a great guy to talk to. And you know what, Doug? He knows more about engineering than my professor at Melbourne Uni. And I said, Johnny, keep listening. See, when we go out there on the street, on the van, it's not about the food. Because they're not starving. They haven't got malnutrition. That's the big thing people get. You know, they comment to people and they say, hey Doug, those guys in the street, and those women, they're just ordinary people, like you and me. Of course they are. Anyway, about 3 or 4 months later, I was out in the street again, no sign of Johnny's friend. And I said, Johnny, what's happened? He told me he graduated from Melbourne Uni. He was a good engineer, he started his own business. The business went bust. He fell into depression. Heard that word depression? Heard of Beyond Blue? Fell into depression. He then went into drinking too much. He was so ashamed of everything, he left home and he finished up on the street. And what had happened was that he said to Johnny, Johnny, I am 55 years of age and I know now, because I've been talking to you, and you are the latest graduate coming out of Melbourne Uni for engineering, and you know the latest, and I've still got it, haven't I, Johnny? And Johnny said, you sure have. He said, I'm going back. I'm going to see if I can make it with my family again, and I'm going to start again. Now, it's a very tough gig if you've been living on the street for over, say, a few years to come back. What happened to that guy, I never know. But I pray each night that he's done well. But now we've got people who come on the street tempted. What about the backpacker who arrives in Melbourne? Hey, you're watching the Rio games. How many people have got to be very careful with possessions? Imagine you're in Melbourne, a strange city, you just arrived from overseas, you don't understand the language, and you're robbed. Homeless. All of a sudden you find yourself on the street. What we do when we find those sort of people, we try to direct them, and I might know my mate Tim, and I say, Tim, I know you're catching a train to come to the van, and I know you're sleeping out somewhere. Can you take this young bloke and look after him for the night? No worries, Doug. Right. The big story is one night we're out there, and I had people who are from corporate world. I've had the Governor General of Australia out there. But this night I'm out with a corporate person, and there's a lady who came in a business suit. Girls, I don't know, but a business suit for this woman, and this guy said to me, she works in Collins Street. Pop into Collins Street. This is where she's got a very good job. She came along very quietly. Now, if people come the first night, we make certain that we're very gentle. Because all of a sudden, this lady, for some reason, was coming to a soup can. She quietly asked for some sandwiches, and then she asked for a sleeping bag. And then she went off into the park near the MCG to camp for the night. Thank God it wasn't raining. I went home that night, and I wondered. And the first thing that comes into your head when you leave the soup can after you've worked on it, what's this to her? What's the reason? I'll never know the reason. But immediately what we do is we send an email. Didn't know the woman's name, we just give a little description. Well-dressed woman, appeared at the van last night. This goes to all our night leaders. Mate, just keep an eye out for her. She has auburn sort of hair, something like that. We never saw that woman again. But that woman was homeless for one night, and we were there to serve her. Just keep this in mind. Homelessness. The word home. For most of these people, they're away, they're disconnected from their family. Now, it's not that disconnection that you find when you go to uni or when you leave home. You've still got that contact with your family. Hey, in this modern age, the old mobile phone, eh? It's the homeless person, for some reason or other, they lose contact with their family. And what we try to do is encourage them to get back in connection with the family. And the real tragedy of homelessness is that disconnection from family.